I know that for us, it's like, you know, a big kind of gray area, both in terms of understanding it and also in terms of, you know, getting a signature and telling the patient what they need to know. And yet it is probably one of the most important pieces of medical information that we have to oblige by, because it's throughout the whole medical community that you have to understand Hipaa, and you have to understand the dynamics of it, and also, should you not comply with it, what the punishment would be. So Mr. Cameron and I talked about this, and we decided that we probably just need to do a session just on Hipaa. So that's what we're going to do. Let's just get it started up. So we use the acronym, but actually there are words behind this, if you can believe it. And it starts out actually that it's all about confidentiality and privacy from our perspective. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about what it stands for, because I think a lot of us hear the word HIPAA, but we don't understand what HIPAA stands, and it's not HIPAA like the hippopotamus, it's not HIPPA. So be sure that you know how to spell it correctly. They're now doing bigger and stronger and more aggressive, not only in terms of looking at what goes on within the HIPAA environment, but also in terms of how it's going to impact kind of all of everything that we touch environmentally. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about the penalties and the violations and what we as an organization can sustain. We'll talk a little bit about HIPAA and social media, which is now where all of the government is looking now into how social media is now impacting the HIPAA confidentiality and security. And then finally, to understand ways to protect our patients' information. So we're going to just talk from an EMS perspective. And then finally, to let you know what information a patient or another service is allowed to get from us. So hopefully that'll come through. HIPAA stands for the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And it was an act put in 1996, mostly for a couple of reasons. Number one is to allow people that move between insurance companies to keep their insurance coverage. There was no longer the fact that pre-existing conditions would disallow a person from getting insurance, which was a good thing. The other thing is that it talked all about how accountability and the ability of services like ours and all of the medical profession needed to keep things secure and in confidence, and certainly respect the patient's privacy. So that was another part of it. And then the other is that for people that violated this or used it for their own gain or their own purposes, that there was a fraudulent part of this that wasn't being addressed. So now they have addressed that as well. So all of these things at the bottom here were really, really important in terms of protecting not only patients, but in some ways even protecting us from being either sued or found liable of crossing over the line of confidentiality and privacy. So the portability is really that nobody would be denied coverage. The accountability is that the federal government now has responsibility for being sure that all of this is attended to and enforced. And then finally, this is really where we fall. We fall more on the privacy and security part of it. And it's not just us, it's every doctor, every hospital, every healthcare facility, anything in which a person's health, or in some ways their health is being addressed, now has the responsibility of saying, you know what, whatever information we get, we will not let go beyond our boundaries. And the boundaries may be the crew in the ambulance. The boundaries may be 50 going to a house. It's whoever is there and whoever is the person that would have one-on-one contact with that person. It could be the doctor and the patient. So we're all covered by it, but we're going to really focus on EMS today. So actually, it tells a lot about the fact that the confidentiality of what we find out about a patient, you have to really think of as, and I hate to use the word, but it's a good word, is sacred. It's something that we have to revere and we have to certainly honor, because no one wants somebody else to know our private medical records if they don't have to know it. So it could be anything from a prescription drug that they take, it could be a medical condition that they have, it could be a medical condition they've experienced, it could be anything in terms of what medically has impacted this patient that could be a liability should it get out into the wrong hands. And that's the way you have to think of it. Just because you talk to each other down at the post about a call that you had doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing to do, because what if that person now takes that information and then tells a friend, and the friend tells the parent, and the parent tells the parent of the child that was, part of the call. Now it's gone full circle, and guess where it started? It started right here in a very innocent conversation, but we're still liable for that. So I really want to stress to you how important it is to keep the confidence of these calls here and not take them outside, because you're going to take them outside and you don't even know where they're going to go then. So the HIPAA privacy rules, who enforces them? Well, it's the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Health and Human Services, and that's where it all falls. So I could see a violation of the HIPAA rules, call this place up, they would immediately investigate it, and I will tell you, they're pretty vehement about getting to the bottom of it and finding out about it. So that's all that they do. Actually, they just follow up on HIPAA violations. So let's talk about a little bit about inadvertently having something like this happen. So let's say, you're, and I've seen this happen a lot of times, you decide that you're going to go up into the office, or maybe from your computer, or maybe from the radio room, and you print out a report. And you leave it on the print, and it comes out on the printer, and you get a call. And you leave. That's a violation of the HIPAA rules. You cannot leave something in a public place, and we are a public building, believe it or not. Even though that office is locked, this is considered a public building because it is allowed for people to come in and to go out from the public. Could be a patient, could be a friend, could be anybody. But leaving that report on the printer, and I've seen them on the table, I've seen them on the printer, I've seen them in the radio room, is a HIPAA violation. So it actually is saying that anywhere you leave this report unattended for somebody else to see, other than the crew that is responsible for the patient, is a violation of the HIPAA rules. So I think we have to kind of tighten this up a little bit and do a little bit better on being sure that we don't leave these reports all over. And as I said, in some cases, it's inadvertently done because we just, we don't think because we're in a locked building that, we can just leave these reports out, but actually we can't. So let's talk a little bit about the violations and what happens, and it's not going to be pretty, I'll tell you. So wrongful disclosure can include large fines and even jail time. And it can, actually, you could lose your license and they could shut down the post, believe it or not. So they're really pretty vehement about enforcing these. The one on the bottom, it's in terms of the violations are in terms of exactly what the penalty, or exactly what the violation is. The penalty is commiserate to that. So, leaving a report out could be very innocent, a very small fine. Selling the information to somebody for their gain could be a huge fine and a jail term too. So, they really do put the two together. So this will kind of give you a little bit of an idea. So, knowingly releasing patient information can result in a 1-year jail sentence and a $50,000 fine. Gaining information or gaining access to health information. Let's say that you had access to Stanford Hospital's database and you went in there and said, oh, my next door neighbor, something's going on with me. He said, in the hospital all the time, and you go in and you just want to look it up and find out for your own curiosity. That could be a $100,000 fine. That's not your information to gain or to look at. And releasing patient information to harmfully sell it for monetary gain can be a 10-year sentence and a $250,000 fine. So you can see that this office does not take any of this very lightly. So, in terms of us, I think we're really good about it. I think we do a very good job of keeping our information here, of being sure that it doesn't get outside the parameters here. And this is really a reminder that, you know, you have to really watch how you say it, what you say, and who you say it to. So, you know, in talking a little bit about a call within your crew is fine to talk generally about a call in which nobody can be identified by name, by birth date, by location, is fine too. But whenever you get into specifics, then there's a liability that can happen. So you want to keep it as general as possible. If you want to talk about the dynamics of a call, that's fine, but don't give any specific information that's tied to it. And what do our patients expect of us? Well, I have to honestly say that I have, I don't know how many times, read negative Hipaa due to, and I literally laugh because the excuses are almost funny after a while. Remember, it's our policy and our responsibility to tell a patient that anything that went on during this call in terms of our care and their medical condition is held in high confidence. And that's what you have to tell them. Our obligation is to tell them that we will carry on the confidentiality that has happened at this call. And we have them sign that document for two reasons. Number one, that we've told them that. And number two is that we've given them a document that explains all of this in detail. If we don't do that, then we have shirked our duties to comply with the HIPAA rules. So even if you do not get their signature, leaving the piece of paper with them is equally as important. But I understand people on backboards, definitely people who are unconscious, minors can't sign it, but there shouldn't be any other reason. You know, just because, you know, their right hand is splinted, have them sign it with their left hand. Even if they're backboarded, you know, put it on a clipboard and have them sign it. I mean, I think we don't do it because we're a little lazy, and I understand that. And I know that a couple of years ago, we said the riders were going to do it, and the riders were so afraid of the patients to ask them to do this that it kind of fell by the wayside. So I think we have to kind of be more aggressive about getting this done, because it is our responsibility to follow this. Yep.
Is a family member okay if you have a patient that's either out of it or a lot of pain or whatever? Can you get a family member to sign it?
It has to be the guardian, has to be a parent,
Okay.
can't be a brother and sister, it can't be a minor.
Or a spouse?
Well, it can be a spouse.
It can be a spouse?
Yeah, if the spouse is not able to sign it, it can be the spouse, yes. And then also information provided by the patient to us. Remember, it will be not used for any purposes other than what we use for in order to treat them and to transport them and to get them to the hospital. You want to go?
You just said also training.
Training,
Roundtable, we use a lot of
Specific use for
information
training.
about these patients.
Okay, it is, we do use it, but do you notice that we black out
No, but
that
it's
critical
very
information?
specific. You said general, it's very specific about everything this patient.
But it doesn't, as long as we don't give the patient's name, where they live, their birth date, that's all. If we can't identify the patient, if I can't identify who this person is, then it can be used for training purposes, it can be used for discussion. But as soon as I can make that connection, then it loses its, it loses its ability to be anonymous. And that's, you have to just say that.
Birthday is blocked out.
All the patient information blanked out. Blacked out.
Case two, I mean.
I have to accept this. So, a couple things. Actually, speaking of patients, this came up, Marilyn was talking about this. The vitals pad, that's a violation of HIPAA if you leave that lying around, right? It's got their date of birth, it's got their name, they have their address, that's what's going on. So that pink pad, put it in the little shredder. That's why there's shredder containers right outside the reports room in Stanford, or rip them up. The other thing that, a little aside, is I've received a few complaints about crews talking about patients in the reports room, sort of making light of their conditions and stuff like that. That's not a HIPAA violation, that's just rude. And I know that there's a lot of that goes on in other services, and people downplay a lot of the calls and things like that, but I'd rather us not do that and not sort of set an example with the younger people in the membership by doing that. So just be mindful of that. So social media, you know, Facebook, Twitter, be very, very careful. This goes beyond just for posts. You're going to see this when you get a job one day. You've heard it before. If it's not something that you're willing to post on, you know, a bulletin board somewhere, don't do it, because it very well could be posted on a bulletin board somewhere. With regard to patient information, don't use it for any patient information. I want to speak briefly about taking photographs on scenes. I realize that on a bad car accident, things like that, everybody is used to being asked or watching SEMS and things like that. You should take a photograph. We used to carry cameras in the fly cars for the purposes of showing the mechanism of injury to the emergency room. Oh my God, you have no idea how much intrusion there was inside the passenger compartment. This force was impacted on the patient. This is how bad it was. While that is generally a practice that is out there, I would suggest strongly that we tend to move away from that. I know it is done elsewhere, and it continues to be done elsewhere to this day. I would recommend we get out of the habit of doing that. If you can't describe to the ER staff the significant mechanism, then you know you should be able to do it that way. You shouldn't. That's what I would rather see. We'll avoid problems in the future. Are there any questions before I go on about social media? Because this recently was a problem for one of us, and I really want to make sure you guys are comfortable with that. Did you guys know that there is a fake ID that a college guidance counselor set up somewhere in Darien in the middle school, and there's something like 900 friends now for this person? Have you heard that?
It's like a clown. It was last year. It was like he put his face like a clown. It was
How do you-
like Bozo the clown.
Right, cool.
And then he went to, I forget what this was for, but it was like a meeting. And they pulled him up, and the guy was like, "So how many of you are Facebook friends with me?" And half the audience was like, "Oh." And
Right.
it had a bunch of names on it.
So, okay, this has nothing to do with
Wait, they were like, what?
my wife was doing grad school. My wife was telling me about this, and I was like, "You're kidding me?" And you know, I have a ninth grader, and you know, she went into her Facebook because that's what we do. We stalk our children. And sure enough, you know, my daughter was friends along with like every one of her friends was friends with this person. So, you know. Don't just say like, you know, oh yeah, friends, cool, let's do it. So anyway, nothing to do with it. But it's a fact, and this is in your high school. So anyway, social media, I think I covered. Don't talk about the patients outside of it. It is okay for the purposes of training to discuss this stuff. That was just mentioned, that's very important. You know, you learn from this stuff, and it's okay. Very specific conditions and treatments and things like that, that's fine. No hearsay speculation. Again, just don't, I mentioned this, if you're not going to say it in public, don't put it online. Venting about post. I don't know, I think if you want to vent about post, you know, go ahead. But, you know, you'll be, you know, we'll try to. Well, address is intrinsically tied to the person, right? So you can't talk about that. You know, because it's a small town, you want to obviously be aware that people are going to be observant. So just, you know, try to protect the privacy that way. One other thing happened recently. I got a call. We had a call. A person who was a caregiver for his mother complained. Did I mention this at the meeting? Where there's a problem? Did I talk about that?
Well, you talked about to me.
Okay. Well, anyway, the complaint was that he got to the hospital and his sister was there waiting for the two of them, which sounds great, right? You know, my sister's there, mom's going to the hospital. Problem is, he was the caregiver. Apparently, he and the sister hadn't spoken in like 4 years, and the mother wanted nothing to do with the sister. But what happened was, somebody made an innocent phone call saying to an acquaintance saying that so-and-so was brought in. The call finally made it to the sister, because the sister was the connection with the postie. And, you know, that led to a potential problem. I mean, these kinds of things happen. Just be careful. Don't talk about the calls with specific information, and try to keep it contained in house. So, yeah, I covered all this. Any questions on what makes it identifiable? Photos, locations. Again, sounds. You know, you got sirens coming, so people are going to see that we're at a house. So you know, don't talk about something. We had one call that day, and it was a big one. You'll also be asked sometimes about you know, high-profile calls. We had the truck accident a year ago. That was a big deal. You may find media getting involved. Do not speak to the media on anything. You can just send them my way. Give them my phone number. My response will be, we don't comment to the media on things like this. So just so you know, but you can deflect anything to me. Any questions on that? So some of the pertinent information, I think we covered anything. Obviously, so we don't collect Social Security numbers. But if you're riding with Stanford, you'll see that they do. That's for billing. But medical record numbers, email addresses, I think everything else is pretty self-explanatory. Be careful with pill bottles if you happen to be taking a pill bottle as well. Sometimes people's medications, you grab a bag of medications. A bottle of medication falls out, it's expired, it's empty, you don't care. Don't just throw that away. You know, dispose of it properly. It may in fact have to be returned to the patient. Suppose it's something that's that you can, it's renewable, right? You have free refills. You know, that's important to the patient. It makes their lives easier, so we want to give that back. And I think that's it. You want me to do this here?
No.
You can do it, please.
Okay. This is a really good example, and we do this all the time. We wheel the patient into the ER, and we see the nurse. And the first thing that we do is we know that we have to tell the nurse, we have to kind of do the handoff of the patient, so we start to tell the nurse about the patient, both in terms of their condition and the treatment and, you know, our vital sign and everything like this. We are now considered, again, in a public place. It's a no-no. The thing to do is what? Who knows? Erin.
Like, ask the nurse to go into the other room, or go into, like, if you're at Stanford especially, you can go like into the like the center and like
Or
and keep it quietly.
what might be another option?
You can write stuff down.
You can write on the vitals pad and give it to them, or
Bring it to a room.
or brief them in the patient's room, not in the public area. You know, we're so anxious to do the handoff of the patient that we're now violating HIPAA. So we really should be discussed in the private room, you know, given the piece of paper, or take them over on the side where nobody else is going to hear, because even though you don't give the patient's name, it could be somebody that knows them by sight. And now they've heard this whole story, and, you know, the conditions usually are not something that's serious, but every once in a while we do bring in a serious patient, and, you know, something that you really don't want public. So be very, very careful of how you do this. You know, if you're going to give details, pull them into the room, give it to them face to face. Even if they're standing there and say, "What do you have?" Just say, "Can we go in the room and I'll you know, tell you about the patient." And this is exactly how the Ryan Act started, because the Ryan White Law started because somebody gave information in a public place, in a hospital, and the fact that he had AIDS. So we get these laws that come in after the fact, but for a good reason. A little bit about why we can use it. We can use it for QA and performance improvement. That's okay, just as long as we don't give any specific information. We can use it to review and evaluate competencies and qualifications for our EMTs. So often I will talk about a call during EMT class. I will not give the patient's name or any specifics that would identify it. I would just give the scope of what happened on the call. That is permissible, because you don't even know if it was last year or 20 years ago for me. So, training future EMS providers, we use it too. And also for fundraising, we don't use it, but I do know other services will talk about certain calls in which they have, we've had 25 cardiacs, or we've had 150 stroke victims. Those are okay because those are statistics not tied specifically to anybody. So case number 2, you learn that one of your neighbors was transported by Darien EMS. So you're concerned and you want to find out where his associate was transported so you can send his condolences. He can easily find the information by accessing the report. Is that a good thing to do? No. This is clearly unauthorized use of medical information. As curious as you are, if you're curious for yourself, that's probably okay, because you may be looking at it from a learning perspective, I hope. But remember that anything that can be tied to the patient must be authorized for its usage. So be very careful on something like that. It's good for us to tell the patient what their rights are. So we do require that we give them that notice, as I said before. We do require that we let them know that everything that happened on this call will be kept in confidence. They don't know, but you need to tell them so that they know. So really we want to give them that piece of paper so that they can review it. If you don't want to give them a long explanation, just say, this is our Hipaa rules, which is really our privacy and security of patient information. All the information is on here. You can read it. If you will just sign that we have given it to you, thank you very much. Bing, bada bing. It's as easy as that. So we do a good, what they call a good faith effort to get the patient to sign it. Granted, there are times when they can't, but please, no silly excuses anymore. There are minimum standards, and on occasion, someone will have to access confidential information. If you do, keep it confidential, and in any way, don't disclose it or use it outside the organization. That's all that we ask. We also do not want to leave anything unattended, as I said, anything out in the office or the crew room, or even, anywhere in the building, it should not be left unattended. Every report should go from being printed to being locked. And that's why we have that lockbox downstairs. These are the only ways that we are allowed to release information. And I know I get this call every once in a while, can we give this report to so-and-so? If you suspect child abuse, the police have a right to request patient information. That's the Darien Police and the State Police. Go ahead.
I've gotten a few calls from time to time, and I think it's great if you call and you ask me if the police want to know, say, a date of birth. They can have that information. If they're on a call, think about it like if we don't get some information.
How do you know it's them?
What?
How do you know it's them?
Are you allowed to do it on
Well,
the phone?
if you don't know it's them, then tell them to call me. But if you said that this is Lieutenant Anderson, and he sounds like Lieutenant Anderson, not like one of your friends, I would say, but yes. You probably know where the call being generated from, because usually will say Darien Police. But they are entitled to that information. If you suspect enough the police, tell me. But that is important.
Lisa?
Marilyn, what if you're in a public place and you have a patient that's hurt and somebody at the public place wants the person's name and address for their accident report?
Can't do it.
Okay, they have to ask the patient themselves.
And this is really the key part of this. That most of the time the police will ask because it's a criminal investigation. It could be a motor vehicle accident. It could be, some kind of criminal activity at a house or something. That's the only time that they will really request it. And they know when they can ask for it, and they know when they can't, and they know how to ask for it. So they're pretty knowledgeable about it. So I don't think that you'll get them kind of going behind the scenes to get it. In certain court instances, the court can ask for it, and we do get subpoenaed for these. Some of you may have gotten a phone call where a lawyer is asking for this information, and you put these things in Rob Clark's box so that he knows that he is going to send this report to them. And that too, is confidential information. So if you do write it on a piece of paper, what you will probably end up doing is putting the lawyer's name and then probably the name of the report that they want. That's okay, as long as it goes from you to Rob Clark's box. After that, it's his responsibility to be sure that the report gets out. And the sooner they do those things, the better it is for us. Sometimes they come by letter. And then in cases where a suspicious death or in certain injuries, gunshot wounds and things, again, it's the same old thing, where some kind of criminal activity happens, then they will probably want this. Under Hipaa rules, the patient has the right to see whatever we write. So if you ever get a patient who says, can I see that, your report, they have the right to see it. Not the spouse, not the parent, not the brother, not the sister, but the actual patient. They have the right to read it if they want to. I don't know, has anybody ever gotten anybody that's asked for it? I don't think anybody's ever asked for it, but they do have the right to do that. They can make a formal request to us in writing. They cannot just call us up on the phone and ask us for it, nor can they come down here and ask us for it. It has to be in writing. And then it's given to Rob Clark and he generates the report. And the privacy officer has 60 days to either accept or deny the fact that they will give them that report. So, final case, you're treating a child who has a suspicious bruise or other injuries and you suspect the child is being abused, but her mother insists she is not and begs you not to report these incidents. Where does that put you? What then? What'd you say? Okay, report it to the police is one way. What's the other way? Okay, we can report it to the Department of Children and Family Services. So those are the two avenues that we have. Do we have an obligation to do that? Yes, you bet we do. And part of the HIPAA rule says that we can report this to the police or to DCF, but we are to keep the confidentiality of the patient. So it goes from us to them with nothing intermediary. So there is a minimum standard in which we are obliged to do that. Andrew?
Can you tell a nurse when you're bringing the patient in the hospital and then they get filed DCF, is that okay?
Yeah, if you do it in confidence
Right,
to
right.
them.
Okay.
Yes, they can do it too. So, just in summary, remember, don't share any patient information in an unauthorized way. We do get fined for it. You as a person, you can lose your certification as an EMT. We could lose our certification as an EMS service, so really be very careful with it. And finally, look over these HIPAA regulations. Know them and feel confident in them. I cannot tell you how many doctors and nurses have been called upon for HIPAA violations, and they're very sensitive to it today because in the beginning, everybody said, oh, nobody's going to enforce this, and then they started going after them, and one after another was getting huge fines. So, even they are very, very cognizant of it. If you know that this is being violated, by all means, you can file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Health Services. And also, if you do file it, and I'm telling you this from information, that they have to act on it in no less than 80 days, 180 days. So we do our part and they do their part. And that also brings me to writing your reports in the reports room, which you do, which I think is great. I think it's nice that you write them there. I think it's nice that we now have 2 people in that reports room to do it. But it's not a time to really talk about the call to anybody other than the crew that was there. So try to keep kind of your conversations to, if it's a SEMS person, to them and the crew, not to anybody else that is extreme. And that is it. Any questions? Yeah.
If you describe what HIPAA is, but you don't give the sheet, is the signature still valid?
Yeah, it is, but it's like any other acronym. HIPAA will mean nothing to them. Just say it's a privacy and confidentiality document.
If you say that, you don't have to give them like the.
No,
We
that's for them to read.
are technically obliged to give them a sheet of paper then that is right.
Yeah,
In
the
fact,
pink sheet.
just so everybody knows, the only time that I've actually seen it happen was when Claire Streeter got taken off of chemo by the paramedic, and the guy, took her away and handed me a Hipaa sheet with the signature. I was like, God, we didn't put more of this. That is, they're supposed to have a sheet. Once you've given a patient, like if you go to 719 Post Road, you don't, and we do it once, it lasts forever. Once you've got a Hipaa signature and the guy's given a sheet, and you go back there, you never have to do it again. But we should technically be handing a sheet with that signature. The signature says we gave them, we advised them of their rights under HIPAA. And we didn't go through the exercise of putting the sheets in the metal boxes, and they're in there. And we should do it, and we don't. SIMS doesn't, and I don't know about any other services, but we should be doing it more. And if asked, we should be doing it.
That's true. If you give, we have a lot of frequent flyers here. If you give it to them once, you don't ever have to give it to them again. Yeah. I think.
I'm Eileen Raleigh, for those of you who don't know me. I just wanted to say from a healthcare delivery perspective inside the hospital, a couple of things to you guys. Prior to any of this, and there's a number of professional medical people here, this was something that we did as individual providers. So I wanted to say to you guys, if you were a patient of mine 20 years ago, before this was in service, I would have protected your identity, what treatment you had. Think of it from a professional standpoint, and think of it from the standpoint of how you would like to be treated, how you would like your family member to be treated, that you're not disclosing this. And when you are, and if you do, and you all see violations of it, it looks, sounds very, very unprofessional. And one thing I do know, being kind of new with being involved in the organization, is the high level of professionalism that is here and that is required to be here. So I just, want to convey that. And I work in an environment that daily we are assaulted by HIPAA violations, in the sense of people trying to get information, very high profile clients coming to us and treating with us. People will call and say, well, I saw in People magazine this person who treated with you. And our blanket statement is cannot confirm or deny. So I would recommend we all find something we're really comfortable with, because you're going to get phone calls, you're going to get kids at school, with something that you can convey to the person, you're a professional, and you would treat them the same way. Because I've had people ask me, can't you just tell me if so-and-so was there? And my response to all of those inquiries is, if you were at our facility, I would never reveal that. So how would you feel if I did it for someone else? So it
The best
loses
thing to do is
credibility
just-
for me.
The best thing to do is just to say, I don't know anything about it, and if they know you were there, I can't talk about it. Easy as that. Yeah.
Can I go back to Tamara's comment about like giving them the sheet? Like, is HIPAA still valid if you offer them, because I've offered patients the sheets and say they don't want it, and they sign it.
Just fold it in half and put what their thought. Yes.
Does HIPAA come into effect if a bystander takes a picture?
Actually, we're not liable for that, they are liable for that. We can't enforce it. We're just talking about our service. Okay?